Listening to the Let's Talk About It show with me, Sharmeen Ziaudeen, on Ramadan Radio, London, 87.9 FM, online at ramadanradio.org and streaming on Facebook. If you just search Ramadan Radio London, you'll be able to see our Facebook page. How is everyone today? It is the 15th of April. It's Thursday, nearly the end of the week. Yay for that. A bit dull outside where I am. I don't know about you guys, but it's definitely not as sunny as it has been. So let's get straight into the show. Today's show is about inspiring people, young and old, to follow what they believe in, what they're passionate about, especially if that is going to benefit the Ummah or society in general. So first, I just want to start with a quick hadith. This is a Sahih Muslim hadith. Verily, Allah does not look at your appearance or wealth, but rather he looks at your hearts and actions. So a lot of us have good intentions, but putting them into action is often much harder. I speak for myself before I'm talking about anybody else. So today's guest has a long line of accolades, mashallah. She really is an inspiration, which is why I was keen to get her on the show. It's Akeela Ahmed, MBE, social entrepreneur and equalities campaigner. She's the chair of the Anti-Muslim Hatred Working Group, which is a government task force set up to deal with anti-Muslim hatred. As well as this, she is the founder of She Speaks, We Hear, which is a platform to give Muslim women a voice, unfiltered and unadulterated. Getting my words all tangled up today. And more recently, she's been chosen as part of the Inspiring Women series by the Bradford Literary Festival. So welcome, Akeela. Thank you for joining me today. How are you doing?
Assalamu alaikum. I'm very well. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, doing well. I'm just glad it's almost the weekend. Not quite though. So thanks for joining us today. I've known you for a few years, but not really that well. So this is a really good chance to get to know you a little better. So let's start at the beginning. How did you get involved in the Anti-Muslim Hatred Working Group?
Yeah, so we've known each other through She Speaks, We Hear, but I chair the Anti-Muslim Hatred Working Group, which is a government working group, and it was set up by government in 2012 to take forward proposals that they could consider to address anti-Muslim hatred and Islamophobia. So the group's been around for 8 years, and I joined as an independent member. And at the time, I was also the CEO of the Muslim Youth Helpline, which was a young person's charity, which was set up to help young Muslims deal with, any kind of issue that they're going through. So I was invited to join as an independent member, join the Anti-Muslim Hatred Working Group because of my role at the Muslim Youth Helpline, and because of the insights I had and the stories I had from what young Muslims were going through, and in particular, some of the issues that they were dealing with around discrimination. At the time, a lot of young Muslims were talking about not being able to kind of get the job that they wanted, or feeling like that, if they were visibly Muslim, that they would be treated differently in the workplace. So I joined in that capacity. And then, so the way the working group is structured, it basically it's a cross-government working group. So its members are different government departments from across government. And then there are also independent experts. There's about 10 independent experts. So I specifically chair the independent experts. So although I joined as an independent member in 2012, in 2016, I was nominated to become chair. And then that's how I became chair.
Right. And does that involve quite a lot of work?
It can do, yes. So I think we're sort of, in our terms of reference, we're asked to give about 10 hours per month, but actually, it can vary, and it can be a lot more than that. So at the start of the pandemic, all the way last year, government put a pause on their working groups. But as independent members, we felt that actually we knew that Islamophobia was going to sort of arise in some shape or form during COVID, because usually when there's a crisis, invariably, for whatever reason, for a lot of complicated reasons, there are, certain sort of far-right groups that will sort of use a crisis as an excuse to start sort of putting forward anti-Muslim memes and fake news, and they'll start blaming Muslims for the crisis. So that happened at the beginning of the COVID pandemic last year. So we took the decision that while government is concentrating on dealing with COVID, we're going to keep an eye on anti-Muslim hatred and sort of see what's happening and kind of really encourage some solutions to deal with some of the issues that we were seeing. So, you know, during that time, you know, I spent probably, I don't know, maybe a day or 2 days a week on this area, and it can vary basically. So next week we've got a virtual iftar that's coming up that we've organized because we you know recognize that like this, you know, it's really nice to be able to connect with people during Ramadan in new ways, I guess, because we can't do the kind of traditional stuff of meeting family, socializing, you know, going to the mosque and that kind of thing.
And the virtual iftar, is that for anybody to attend?
Yeah, absolutely. So the virtual iftar is happening next Thursday and it's open to everyone. And we've partnershiped with the Armed Forces Muslim Forum, and we're dedicating the virtual iftar this year to those who've been at the front line battling COVID-19. So we're really dedicating it to our NHS heroes. We're going to have speakers from the armed forces who've also been dealing with COVID and supporting the NHS. And then we've got some high level speakers as well. So we've got the chief rabbi will be speaking, and we've got an MP, Mark Eastwood MP, who will be fasting that day, and then he'll be talking about his experience of fasting as a non-Muslim at our iftar.
Well, that sounds pretty exciting. I'd like to hear what how his experience goes. So if you can, we can just look that up. We'll put the link to that in the Facebook chat. Actually, if anybody wants to join the virtual iftar, that would be really nice. Hopefully, I'm going to try and join as well. So it involves a lot of interfaith dialogue, by the sounds of it. You've worked with rabbis and Jewish groups as well, and Christian groups. How has that experience been through the pandemic? It's all been a bit strange, I assume.
Yeah, during the pandemic, it's, you know, we've had to switch to doing everything online through Zoom meetings and Zoom events. But I think that the interfaith element and working with not only sort of interfaith groups, but sort of other groups is really important, because we're, as Muslims, you know, we might experience anti-Muslim hatred or Islamophobia, but we're not the only ones who experience these sorts of prejudices. You know, other faith groups do as well. And I think when faith groups come together, you know, when many voices come together on a single issue, then you can kind of learn from each other and learn from each other's experiences in coming up with, you know, solutions to deal with the problem. But B, then you also have a louder voice, and you also have support, you have allies. So it's been really important for us that, you know, we speak up against anti-Semitism when we see it happen. And then in turn, you know, our Jewish colleagues have also done the same, and same with, you know, Christian colleagues and, you know, people from the Sikh and Hindu faith as well. So on the anti-Muslim hatred working group, we have a representative from the Sikh communities, Jasveer Singh, because, you know, many Sikh men are also targeted, you know, because people believe that they mistake them basically for being Muslim. And so they end up getting targeted with anti-Muslim hatred. And so we felt it was important that there is a, you know, a member of the Sikh community who can also talk on this issue. We can kind of think together about some of the issues that they're facing, because potentially the root cause, you know, is the same. It's basically negative attitudes, you know, misunderstanding about minorities and faith communities.
Yeah, no, that sounds like very important work, actually. And that is the way forward, uniting with other minorities, absolutely. So obviously I mentioned the MBE, you have 3 big letters after your name. So do tell us about that, because I think it's quite, I don't think there's many Muslim, hijab wearing women that have an MBE, but how did that come about?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm not entirely sure how it came about. You know, I was really shocked when I received the letter. I remember I got the letter in the post saying that you've been nominated for an honor, an MBE, and, you know, if you'd like to accept it, then sort of, you know, write back to us or whatever. And I just couldn't sort of believe it. So I sort of showed the letter to my husband, and I was like, you know, what is this saying? Is this real? And then he was like, oh my God, you know, you've been nominated for an honor. So usually you don't necessarily know who's nominated you. So I'm not entirely sure who nominated you. But it was really nice. It was nice to get the nomination. Sometimes people have these kind of misconceptions that you get an honor because, I don't know, you're close to certain people, you say certain things, or, you know, whatever. But it, you know, actually the amount of hours and hard work that I put in, into kind of doing not only the anti-Muslim hatred working group, but other kind of stuff for the community. I just do it because I'm passionate about it. And I don't think about, oh, I'm going to get an honor at the end of it. It doesn't work in that way. These things, you never know when they're going to happen, and it never works in that way. So, the honor that I received, it said it was for services to Muslim women. So I like to think it's about the work that I do in trying to elevate the voices of Muslim women, really trying to break down the kind of misconceptions that people might have about Muslim women, and really kind of raise awareness of some of the issues that we face, and also, bring forward kind of, I guess, solutions and things in terms of addressing those issues. And when I received the honor, I really felt like it wasn't just me that was receiving it. It was all the Muslim women that I work with, and that, sometimes I end up speaking for in the media or whatever. I really felt like it was an honor for all of us. And I really see it in that way. If I didn't have that community behind me, I wouldn't have got the honor at all. It's not like something that people just dish out just for the sake of it. So yeah, I was incredibly proud and just gobsmacked.
You should be proud, definitely. That brings us on to She Speaks, We Hear, talking of Muslim women. So I'm also part of the group of She Speaks, We Hear, which you founded back in, was it 2016 or 15?
Yeah, but around about that time.
Yeah. So, okay, tell the listeners, what is She Speaks, We Hear all about?
Yeah, so when I set up She Speaks, We Hear, at the time, I was getting a lot of calls to talk about Muslim women in the media, but they were on really negative issues. So I was often getting called to talk about niqab. The niqab debate would come up every kind of week. Should the niqab be banned? Why do women wear the niqab? Is it a major problem? All of that kind of stuff. And then I was also being called about, young Muslim women being radicalized, and are they a threat to society, and extremism and that kind of thing. And I was just kind of fed up, I guess, really, of only being asked to talk about Muslim women in these really negative terms and on these kind of really negative framing. And often I'd speak to journalists, and they would be kind of really conscious that, Muslim women are more likely to be like you and me, rather than these kind of stereotypes that they were actually asking me to talk about. But they just didn't have the kind of the stories and things, and they didn't know who to speak to either. And I felt like it was time that people heard the kind of everyday voices of Muslim women, and not just Muslim women, but other women as well, who are often kind of misportrayed, or we don't hear about in the media. And I was just so conscious that whenever in the mainstream media, whenever we heard about Muslim women, it was always in this kind of binary as either a stereotype of somebody who's a threat to society or somebody who is oppressed. And there's just so much more to us, and those stories are important and they do happen, but it's not the sort of majority of the everyday stories, where we're just like other people, basically. We're concerned about the same things: family, employment, worrying about our parents, we're getting on with our lives, we like enjoying our doing our faith, like Ramadan and celebrating Eid and things like that. So I set it up as a platform for the everyday voices of women, but with a focus on Muslim women. And it's kind of grown over the years. So originally we just had blogs, and then I think COVID kind of changed everything, and we moved to doing Instagram lives, which you've been a fantastic part of, and that's been a really great opportunity to hear from so many different types of Muslim women who are doing so many amazing things, who've not only spoken to us about their journeys and their kind of careers and things and experiences, but they've also sort of given us tips. So we've had tips about home learning, we've had tips about nutrition, fitness, so many sort of different women that we've spoken to, psychologists and things, and it's been great. So I think last year we interviewed over 30 women during our lives, and this year we've kind of taken a bit more of a pause, I think, because we're all kind of zoomed out or Instagram lived out. I say that speaking on Zoom.
Yeah.
But I think, we kind of felt like we need to kind of just take a bit of a breather as we sort of slowly start coming out of this pandemic, and inshallah we can start seeing family and friends again.
Yeah, no, I think we will continue the lives. I think after Eid, won't we? So we'll have some interesting and inspirational women coming on, experts in their fields, and that's something to look forward to, for sure. So this not nomination, I'd say you've been at the Bradford Literary Festival, where you've been listed as an inspirational woman. I think is it South Asian women specifically, but
Yeah.
I saw the video on Twitter earlier, and it was really lovely, and it's a really nice thing to be involved in. How did that all happen? Or were you just chosen without your knowledge?
Yeah, so I was just asked basically. They asked, would you like to take part in this series? Somebody had kind of recommended me, and I said yes, basically. After a lot of kind of thinking about it, and I always do feel a little bit wary of kind of doing these things because, I don't know, I don't want. When I think about myself and what I do, I don't think about, oh, I'm such an amazing person and wow, I'm the only person doing this or whatever. I just do what I like doing, and I really believe that anybody can do what I've done, but the whole point of this kind of series was for people to kind of learn from all the women who've been featured in the series. They can people can learn from our experiences and our journey, and can understand that even if you face barriers, you can still try and achieve, and kind of reach your dreams or goals if you want. So that, from that angle, that's what motivated me to do it, basically.
Yeah, one of the things that really struck me about the video that I saw that they've put up is that you did a degree in physics, and then you were thinking, but you want to do something that helps people, and you want to do something for the community. And I think a lot of people have that feeling, but they just have, they've done a degree in whatever, and they just want to go down that line. And I think it's really refreshing, and you're very lucky, and obviously you have the passion for it, that you were able to kind of choose your path. What advice would you give to people who say are studying something and they're thinking, oh, but I don't really want to go into biomedical sciences, I don't really want to work in a bank, I want to do something else that helps the ummah, helps society? What kind of things would you tell or advise young people right now?
Yeah, so I think if you're somebody who wants to help people and you feel like you want to do something more than just your degree, then get involved in where your passions lie in a kind of extracurricular activity wider at university. University was really good for me in that, I joined like the Islamic Society and the kind of Muslim Student Society. I was at UCL, so we had a slightly different society who kind of did their own thing as well. And that kind of linked up with other universities, and that was a really good opportunity for me to kind of get involved in organizing events. And I felt like I was doing my bit, especially during Ramadan. We'd have like iftars, and we'd bring people together, to do prayers and du'as and things, and that felt really unique, and like I was giving something back. And then through that, then I met other people from different degrees and things, and people had different like experiences. So then I kind of had more of an understanding of the different types of things I could get involved with after university. So that really helped me. And then I guess, yeah, I would really suggest doing that. And I'd also suggest that look into like what you really want to do. And so for me, I started working with asylum seekers and refugees, but I started doing that in a part-time way, before I left university. And then actually I kind of stuck with that after I left university. So, I'd really sort of advise people to kind of, maybe if they can, if they've got opportunities, I know now it's really difficult, but to kind of test different areas that you feel you might want to work in. And you can do that through volunteering. It doesn't have to be a job. It could be like a summer voluntary placement or whatever. And yeah, I think that just gives you a good sense of what you want to do and things. And I'd also really recommend exploring further education and maybe kind of changing your kind of career track. So I then did a master's as well in mental health studies after working with people who had mental health problems, just because I became really sort of fascinated and really interested in the area. And I felt like I'd built up sort of, some vocational experience, but I wanted to have the kind of theoretical grounding behind it. So then I went away and did a master's. So I'd really encourage people to also explore other options like that as well.
Yeah, no, that sounds like good advice. After you did the mental health masters, you mentioned that you worked for Muslim Youth Line. Um, how was that experience? Must have seen. I think you mentioned elsewhere that it was one of the hardest jobs you've done. So that experience, tell us about that experience, because I think that is something that a lot of people, ordinary people like me, don't have any idea about.
Yeah, so when I was studying my master's, it sort of became kind of eye-opening for me to understand some of the issues that Black and Asian ethnic minority groups, and then specifically within that, Muslim groups were experiencing around mental health. So I'd always had this kind of perception that, I guess, Muslim people or Asian people or minority people basically didn't experience as many problems in terms of mental health and kind of familial or kind of, social challenges, because we have this kind of strong family network and that, that kind of thing. And when I was studying, my master's, I then learned that actually there's these huge disparities where you've got, for example, South Asian women who are dealing with, high rates of anxiety and depression and self-harm and eating disorders like bulimia, but it's remaining sort of unrecognized, it's undiagnosed, and also the kind of high kind of rate amongst these groups in proportion to the rest of the population wasn't fully understood. It was like this quiz. So that was really eye-opening for me. So after I did my master's, I was always looking for an opportunity in which I could do more work in that area. And then an opportunity came up at the Muslim Youth Helpline to join as the helpline manager. And so I kind of jumped for it. I was like, oh, wow, I could do this. And I'd also just been volunteering at a helpline called Get Connected, which now is called something else. I think it's called The Mix. And up until that point, whenever I'd worked with people at the front line, they'd been predominantly just from, the general population. I hadn't worked with minorities in that way, apart from when I was working with asylum seekers and refugees. So it was all sort of new to me. And then I joined the helpline, and I was just really struck by the issues. So the top issues that people dealt with were mental health. Lots of young people going through sometimes serious issues and sometimes not so serious, in the sense that it's all serious, but you had some young people who are dealing with issues like psychosis and schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. So they had these clinical diagnoses. And then, you had more young people, like a larger number of young people, like teenagers, who were dealing with things like depression and anxiety, but they didn't know what they were dealing with. They didn't have a diagnosis. They had nobody to speak to. They tried speaking to the parents, but couldn't sort of make them understand what they were going through, and that they needed to get help, professional help. So I was just really struck by how so many sort of young Muslims were, I guess, to an extent, dealing with these issues in silence, and there wasn't that sort of understanding amongst the community. So in my role at Muslim Youth Helpline, I'd go out and I speak to other organizations, I speak to mosques, I speak to, different sort of community leaders. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes I would be sort of met with this kind of sort of lack of understanding, where people say, but, how big of an issue is it? Like, really, do you need a separate helpline? And the reason that there was a separate helpline was because young Muslims were facing kind of a lack of understanding from their own communities, but then also from kind of mainstream communities. So if they're going to the GP, they'd be met with that stereotype that I had mentioned earlier that I had about, well, here's a young Asian person. They're probably from, a good family. They probably, don't have problems with mental health or whatever. Or they'd be met with kind of stereotypes of, oh, you're Muslim, and actually it's probably really restrictive for you. So if you leave your religion or forget about your cultural practices, then everything will be better for you, and just do what you want, autonomy and whatever. And
Yeah.
for a lot of young Muslims, that's not what they wanted. That wasn't the kind of solution that they needed. They needed something that understood their background, their cultural background, their heritage, understood their sort of current culture, being born in Britain and raised in Britain. But then, their faith wasn't stigmatized within that. Their faith was also seen as a solution to their problems. So that's why people came to Muslim Youth Helpline. So it was really difficult in the sense of the issues that, young Muslims were facing. There was a lot of sexual abuse that came up, which was very difficult. And just, domestic violence and stuff like that. And it was heartbreaking sometimes because, people, it was a confidential helpline and people wouldn't want to give their names and things because they were so sort of worried about what would happen, to them or to their families and things.
Yeah, no, it sounds intense, and really, I'm sure it was a lot of trauma at the time, because when you listen to so many sad stories and teens in experiencing hardship, it's really difficult. It's a lot of trauma to take home with you as well. But no, Muslim Youth Line has gone from strength to strength since, and they're quite active now as well. So that is available for all young people if they need. And I think you're absolutely right that that whole sentiment of Asians and Muslims and even the Black community is the same kind of culture, in that we don't really have these problems. We have a strong network, and we don't really have that sentiment is still prevalent in many families and many communities. It's not got that much easier amongst the elder generation. They don't really believe in it. I've heard many people say, oh yeah, depression, that's not a real thing. That I've heard that recently. So a lot of work to be done, I think, in educating people in our community. Talking of young people, you have 3 children, mashallah. How do you juggle everything? So you work, you have your own business, and all these extra sort of, say, extracurricular, extra things you do in the community. How do you manage all that?
Yeah, it's a good question. It was great difficulty.
I'm sure.
I mean, if you come to my apartment, it's not going to be the tidiest. And yeah, I'm sure there's certain places which could do with a bit of a deep clean, because they've not been deep cleaned for a while, basically. So it's basically, I think I do it with support. So, my husband's really supportive. I try to be organized. That doesn't always work. This morning, basically my son has, on Thursdays, he has games day. And so we sent him in with his shin pads and whatever. And then I was on the parents' WhatsApp group and they were like, oh, they're doing golf today. And I'm like, oh, I had no idea. I just didn't even register that maybe they might change the games. So, sometimes basically I kind of slip up in that sense. I guess I just try to kind of juggle things as best as I can, be kind of easy on myself, and know that I'm not going to be able to be, this kind of all singing kind of, domestic goddess, and then also do all this kind of work and attend meetings and whatever. So I recognize that something sometimes has to give. So I prioritize, children and family, and then work and things around that. So I'm lucky because I run my own business. I'm a bit more flexible in terms of my timings and things, and that's really why I wanted to start my own, one of the kind of motivators to kind of start my own business after I had my 3rd child, was so that I could have that flexibility. So I can work late in the evenings, I can work late in the morning, I'll do work on the weekends. Sometimes it all kind of rolls into one, especially during lockdown. There's no beginning, there's no end, it's all just one great big sort of set of tasks that I have to kind of do sometimes. But I do enjoy it, and I am conscious that I'm very grateful that I've got that flexibility. But having help, and support of my husband and my family, that really makes all the difference, definitely.
Alhamdulillah. I think a lot of women from all cultures, actually, we do feel like we have to be super women. We have to be amazing in the household. We have to be a good cook. We have to be a perfect mother, perfect wife, perfect daughter-in-law, and fantastic at our jobs, and do all this extra stuff. So there is a lot of pressure, I think, on women, especially, I think, I don't want to say especially Muslim women, because our faith it's not demanding, but yet we want to devote time to it. Like in Ramadan, we don't want to do extra stuff. We want to pray more, read Quran more, but often we're kind of bogged down in the kitchen. And I know all mums struggle with this, when they just want to go and do the extra nafil. They just want to just pray on time. They just want to, it's about connecting with the creator. It's not about making a huge iftar, but we do tend to do that. So I think that's something that we all can work on. And I think we were saying off air about trying to keep the iftar simple. And have you made any effort to kind of do that this year, like you were saying about, you know, using up ingredients and things like that?
Yeah, so this year I kind of before Ramadan, you know, because it's really nice actually now. You get to see on Instagram and social media people posting all their decorations and all their like Ramadan prep and making loads of like samosas and spring rolls and stuff. And then I kept thinking, oh, I need to, you know, I need to prep. I need to like make spring rolls or pastries or something. And I bought like tons of just roll pastry and put it into freezer. And then I thought, all right, now I need to do this. And then I just had this realization, actually, you know, I've got a lot of food at the back of the cupboard that you kind of never look at, you know, kind of tins of like pulses and beans and what have you. And I've got dal and flour and stuff. And actually, how about I make an effort to use that stuff instead of going out and buying loads of like different items and things so I can make fancy you know, pastries and cutlets and whatever. And I still well make those things, but just not in the same way. I think this year I'm really trying to focus on doing my bit and using up the food I've got at the back of the cupboard, not wasting. So like yesterday I cooked iftar, but today I'm not going to cook anything new because we've got leftovers. And actually I think it's just really important we finish our leftovers and we don't do any wastage. So, you know, sometimes, you know, the children get a little bit bored or something, but actually they're quite good. So yeah, and it is nice to be environmentally friendly in that sense as well, you know, to kind of reduce the waste and things. And so I've also decided we're not going to buy like new Eid clothes because actually I don't think anybody saw our Eid clothes last year because we were in lockdown. And this year, you know, we can meet up, you know, in groups of 6 or bubbles or whatever. So you know, we're going to use the same Eid clothes and we use the same sort of decorations and stuff as last year and things. So I think I felt a lot of relief once I'd made that decision that actually I kind of don't need to keep up with the Joneses, as my dad was saying. And it doesn't mean, you know, I'm not sort of being critical of other people who do all of that stuff because, you know, mashallah, it's really nice that we're able to do that. And we've got that community, you know, and I love seeing other people's pictures and things. But I just felt for me, my family and kind of the fact that I'm working still and all of that, you know, that just felt like a much better decision.
Yeah, I mean, just taking that pressure off yourself helps immensely, I think. So that's good advice, actually. And yes, it is. I think we need to be a bit more mindful of the environment and how much food we waste and how much plastic we use. I mean, that's a discussion for another day, but definitely something worth thinking about. We've got a little bit of time left. I wanted to just ask you about discrimination and dealing with trolls, slightly different to what we've been talking about, but it is a reality, isn't it, that a lot of people, Muslims especially, have to endure. What kind of discrimination have you faced in your sort of work life, all the extra stuff you do in the community, and how have you kind of dealt with it and got past it?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I was thinking about this because in terms of the work life, if I face discrimination, I think I've been really lucky in that in work I haven't faced discrimination, but when I was young, so like a teenager basically, I wanted to become a lawyer. I was really keen on becoming a lawyer. And then I did work experience at a local law firm in Enfield because I was living in Enfield at the time. And you know, my parents were not professionals, you know, they'd always worked in business. And so I'd, you know, gone out, you know, shopping for this kind of work experience, and I bought like items that I thought were smart looking and would kind of, you know, fit with hijab and whatever. And anyway, I did this work experience. It was completely new for me. And then at the end of it, when I was appraised, I thought actually, you know, I would get a good appraisal, but my appraisal was kind of brought down by my what was called unprofessional attire. So throughout the whole experience, nobody has taken me aside and said, look, what you're wearing is not, you know, in line with the company policy or anything like that. But at the end, they basically said it wasn't professional. And it was because I wasn't wearing the kind of, you know, typical office kind of attire. And nobody had kind of educated me, or there was no role model for me at the time that who, you know, now there's loads of women who I could look at who would be, you know, who are, you know, barristers and they wear hijab and they have suits and whatever. But at that time there was nobody for me to look up to and understand from that. So that really put me off. And so even when I was at university and I was thinking about applying for jobs and things, I always had this kind of thing at the back of my mind that I wouldn't be able to fit into a kind of traditional office because of the way I dressed. And so I kind of avoided it, basically. So it did, in that sense, that experience impacted my career journey. And obviously things have worked out well for me, but that's something I am conscious of and I do talk about. So I was invited a couple of years ago to London Business School to talk about kind of being a minority and women in the workplace and leadership and whatever. And so I raised that at the time. I thought it's a good opportunity. There's loads of professional people in here, loads of managers, whatever, let me raise this. And so I did. But aside from that, I have experienced hate crimes, which obviously is horrible. Thankfully I've been fine. It was nothing sort of what I would call physically serious, but there's been sort of different incidents and I've always reported them to the police. And sometimes the police have been brilliant at in responding to that, and sometimes they haven't done so well. So one experience was I was driving and my son was really young at the time. He's my youngest, so he's 8 now, but at the time he was about a year old, and I had my daughter with me. And I picked up my daughter from school and I was driving really slowly, like 5 miles an hour, and there was a car oncoming, and then he just stuck 2 fingers up at me. And I just couldn't understand why. There was no altercation. I wasn't blocking his way, nothing like that. So the only reason I could understand for him doing that was because I was wearing hijab and I had young children with me. So I basically, having had experience of hate crime before, I knew that you needed evidence in order for the police to follow up. So I basically took out my phone, stopped the car, took out my phone and took a picture of him and the number plate in his car. And that really aggravated him. He started shouting abuse and became really abusive. Anyway, I came back home and I decided to share my experience on Twitter. So I reported it to Tell Mama, and then I shared my experience on Twitter. And then this signaled some far-right personalities who are not on Twitter now, thankfully, to basically create a pile onto me on Twitter. So I was getting thousands of abusive tweets. I couldn't even keep up with them. And some of them were quite horrendous. And at that time, Twitter was really bad at dealing with this kind of trolling. But I was fortunate in the sense that because I was on the anti-Muslim hatred working group, I could then reach out to Twitter and say, look, I'm getting all this abuse because we'd had done some work with Twitter in the past, about this very issue, about trolling and specifically targeted against Muslims and, anti-Muslim trolling. And I said, I'm getting all this trolling and, nothing stopping it, they just keep on at me. And they had identified something like 23 accounts that were trolling me that they had kind of tried to then suspend, and because I kept reporting the tweets, but it was just too much. I mean, thankfully now, Tommy Robinson is not on Twitter. Mm-hmm. He's been deplatformed. Other people have been deplatformed, and deplatforming does work. It just means that then the trolls can't, set up their accounts just to troll you and things. And the other kind of reporting mechanisms that Twitter's now put in place. Yeah. So that, although it was horrible experiencing that, I was just really glad that I was also able to kind of use, use the kind of networks I had through the Anti-Muslim Hatred Working Group to make a positive change, not just for me, but for all, not just Muslim women, but kind of women who are on social media and get this kind of abuse. And actually it's still a problem and more still needs to be done. And the government's trying to, bring in the online harms paper and stuff like that. But, what I would say is that people should be really proactive if they are dealing with anything like that, report it through Twitter, speak to, there's local services that you can speak to. You can speak to, Citizens Advice Bureau, you can speak to Tell Mama, there's lots of different organizations. Some people even write to the MPs to get them to kind of lobby, not lobby, but in a sense, raise awareness of, these issues, ask questions about it in Parliament. So I'd really recommend that people use all of these resources in whatever kind of situation that they might feel that they've suffered discrimination, whether it's like me, at work experience, make a, raise it with a senior manager, make a complaint, things like that. I think it's really important that we do something about it and we don't just kind of, kind of just
ignore it.
Ignore it or put it aside, basically.
Yeah, I think if you don't report it, then it doesn't go on the record. If it doesn't go on the record, then nobody knows it's happening. If they don't know it's happening, then nothing's going to change to stop it happening. I mean, if you've been a victim of an anti-Muslim prejudice incident or hate crime and you're in danger, you obviously call 999, but you can also report an incident to MEND, Muslim engagement, on 0203904655, or you can email mend@iru@mend.org.uk. And I think the work that you're doing with the anti-Muslim hatred group is really beneficial, given that you can speak to such major organizations like Twitter and make them aware of the issues. And as you said, Twitter has improved a lot. There's still a lot of work to be done, I think, on Facebook and Twitter, actually. But as long as people keep raising their voices and we have people like you working in the midst, then inshallah we'll get through it. But yeah, I think something like trolls, I think they'll always exist in some form or another, and I think is something that we sadly have to deal with, but at least the situation is improving a little bit, I think. So that's great.
Yeah, no, definitely it is.
Yeah. I'm conscious that you need to leave, so I'll let you go. Thank you, Akeela, for joining us and for all your words of inspiration and telling us all about what you've done in the past, and wish you all the best for the future. And inshallah, we'll speak again through She Speaks We Hear.
Yeah, inshallah. Thank you so much.
That's okay. So Akeela's leaving now, but before we end the show, I just wanted to go through a few stories that I read this morning. And I hope you found that interesting. By the way, do leave any comments on Facebook, any questions you have or anything you want to ask Akeela. She can answer them by looking on the Facebook comments. So yeah, stories. So there are a few interesting things that I just wanted to share quickly. So I don't know if anybody saw this, but Marks and Spencer's are suing Aldi over their Colin the Caterpillar cake, which they say Aldi has copied and is giving customers false impression that it's as good as the M&S one. So Aldi's is called Cuthbert the Caterpillar. And I just thought I'd share that because I've been to many children's parties where they've had the caterpillar. So if any of you are a fan of that, it is vegetarian and halal, so I'm sure many of you have tried it. But if you've tried Aldi's, then let me know. I'd be interested in seeing how similar it really is. And there's some sad news from India that they're going through a second wave of COVID, and they've had like 150,000 new cases a day. They're labeling it as a COVID tsunami. So that's really worrying for obviously millions and millions of people, population of India being so large. And actually another not so sad incident, actually a funny incident happened. A mystery tree beast turned out to be a croissant in Poland. So people saw this like creature, or what they thought was a creature on a tree, and they called the authorities, and they came, and it turned out to be a croissant, and it just looked like it was some kind of beast. Anyway, I thought that was very funny. There are always amusing stories in the news, as well as all the depressing and sad ones. But with that, we come to an end to the program. I hope you've enjoyed it. We talked about mental health with Akeela, and actually next Tuesday, I'll be talking in a bit more detail about mental health with a guest, Sabine Khan, who is a Muslim counselor and specializes in mental health. And we'll be discussing some of the problems that the youth face today with regards to mental health, and how you can pick up signals if your children or people may be suffering in silence. And sadly, we do have a lot of mental health problems in all communities. And obviously, with our community being quite unique, it'd be good to go over those and look for solutions and things we can do to help people not suffer in silence. So I hope you'll join me for that. That's next Tuesday, inshallah, at 1:00. And to end, I think that's it from me. So do carry on listening to Ramadan Radio later on. We have lots of exciting shows coming up. Jazakallah khair, and thank you for listening to me, Sharmeen Ziaudeen, on Ramadan Radio 87.9 FM. Till next time, Assalamu alaikum.